So the way the shift forks work is there's a drum, and the drum has got cam grooves in it as it to guide along these shift forks. And what happens is there is a shifting mechanism which turns this drum, and it's just basically a fork that just pushes against some pins in the side. But to make your transmission work, it needs to move these shift forks back and forth, in and out, to engage and disengage a particular gear. So, with that being said, what has to happen here is we're going to put our transmission partially together, and we'll explain how each and every gear works as we go through. So the first thing that has to happen on these transmissions is there's a locator for the bearings, and there's a groove in the bearing that allows the locator to, the locator just rests inside of that. So in this particular instance, this is our counter shaft. This is the shaft that goes to the chain. The sprocket sits here, and with that, the chain then runs around that sprocket. Okay? This is the driven shaft. The driven shaft, and we're fitting these into the shift forks, and I'll explain those as we go along. But this gets driven by the engine itself. It goes, the clutch goes, in this particular case, is the chain going to the clutch pack, and the engine itself turns the outer hub, and then the inner hub, which is grabbed on by the clutch plates themselves, transfer power in through here and out to here. But right now we're in neutral because both of these shafts can spin freely. Okay, what happens here to engage a gear? You've got a gear on here, so we've got 5 gears. The smallest would be the smallest to the biggest. Then there's second gear, which is the next smallest. There's third gear, which is the next smallest. And fourth gear, which is this one, which is the next smallest. And fifth gear, which is high gear, which has the biggest gear and the smallest gear here. So the way the transmission works is we need to be able to lock certain gears onto the shaft so that they engage into their respective gear ratios. So what happens here is certain gears are splined onto the shaft. All the gears with the shift forks attached to them are splined onto the shaft. So they engage gears that are not locked onto the shaft. If we look here, we can see I'm holding this shaft here, and I can spin this gear, and I can spin this gear. This guy is locked onto the shaft, this guy is locked onto the shaft. So now, if this guy is locked on the shaft, this one cannot be. So you can see I can spin him by holding that shaft, and I can spin this one by holding the shaft, and I can spin this one. So what ends up having to do for us to transfer power, what we need to do is be able to say first gear needs to go through here so it can transfer power out. And the only way we can do that is to lock this guy onto the shaft. This guy's locked onto the shaft, his counterpart is not. So what we can do is we can slide this in one to here via the dogs on the side. This will slide in and engage with this and lock it onto the shaft. So it's a fairly straightforward operation. The shift fork, which is on a cam, will move this gear into here to get us first gear. So to do that, we will go on ahead and we're going to turn the transmission, the shift drum. We'll turn it so that it moves this gear, and this goes into first, and you can see it slide over. So this gear, which is locked onto the shaft, has now engaged this gear, which now locks it onto the shaft, and we have power through first gear. So it goes here through this gear, and that shaft is now, this gear is now locked onto the shaft, and it can transmit power. So then to come back out, we go back into neutral, before we do anything, because we have a constant mesh transmission, it's always constantly meshing. If it's always constantly meshing, we need to be sequential. And it's a sequential, which means you go through first, it's got to come out of first and into second. You can't just select a gear because the drum rotates. So we're going to go into second. Now second gear is the second largest on this shaft here, so that would be this guy. This one is locked onto the shaft. This one is not. As you can see, it can turn. And what we need to do is move this gear, which is locked onto the shaft, into here so it will lock in. So to do that, we just go turn the shift drum, and now you see the gear move over and it engages this. So now we have power going through here onto this lock gear. This gear is now locked onto the shaft, and we have second gear powering out. Okay, our next gear is third gear. So what's going to happen here is this gear here is going to have to come out of second first, and then it's got to engage into this gear. And to do that, it just does, and it just moves right on through. Let me get it to turn there, and you see it came in and engaged this gear. So now we have power going from here through this gear and out. Okay, so now for it to go into fourth gear, which is this guy here, this needs to come out of third, and then this guy has to come over and engage into this one, and you'll see him do that. So now he's engaged. So now we have power going through here, and out. We have our fourth gear. For it to come into fifth gear, which is the biggest gear on this guy, which it would be here, and so what's going to happen is this gear is going to come out of fourth, and he's going to continue on. Now he's completely out of fourth, so we're kind of in a neutral, to be honest. And then it comes out and goes into fifth. So it locked into fifth, so now we have power going through here and out. Every single time that we change gears, we go through a neutral. You always do, because you can never have two gears engaged at the same time. So that's why sometimes what you hit is a false neutral, and it's because the shift drum didn't turn all the way. So this is like between fourth and fifth, and we're in neutral. So there's a neutral between every real gear. So then coming back out, we need to gear in, and we'll just continue on. So and it comes back out, goes into another neutral. Now it goes back and engages this guy, comes back out, engages this guy, which is our second gear. Then it goes into there's a detent where there's a neutral, and then next one would be this guy gets engaged into here. And that is how the transmission does its dance to distribute power from this shaft through the gears and out. It just does nothing more than engages two gears to a particular shaft. Again, certain gears are always engaged, certain gears are not. And so you get them to engage and it moves on through. So that's how the transmission works.